Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that change is inevitable and we no longer need to go to work to work. As a workplace dynamic strategist and the founder of Community, I draw back the curtains on my own business, the clients and projects that we deliver, along with tapping into the knowledge and insights from academics, business leaders and champions of change. I believe that our environments have the power to positively influence our behaviour and performance, inspiring our human potential. Today is another very special episode. Today is the third episode in a 6-part series where I am bringing you all the conversations from my book launch as we celebrated the release of my book, The Next Workplace, Designing Dynamic Environments that Inspire Human Potential. So for today's conversation, we are in Melbourne. Now, this was the second stop on the tour. We went from Brisbane to Melbourne and finished in Sydney. And each of the conversations I'm bringing you in 2-part episodes. So today is the Melbourne launch episode, and this is the first part. And this was a really special treat for me because this was the time that I got to really indulge in reminiscing over another one of my very favourite projects, and also a project that was featured as a case study in the book, Davidson. Now, Davidson are a national workplace performance firm. And what's really special about this client is that we have worked together on 2 projects now, both Brisbane and Melbourne. And this was the very first time that I got to meet Jacqui Whiteman, Davidson's Chief Operating Officer, face-to-face. So the Brisbane project was actually delivered in the midst of the pandemic, which saw us experimenting with all the tech tools that we had available to us to ensure that we continued to deliver our first-class service to our clients. With Melbourne following shortly after, and with their extended lockdowns, the entire Melbourne project has also been delivered virtually. And so this was a really lovely opportunity for us to connect in real life over a wine and reminisce. We headed back right to the very beginning. We recalled the initial challenges that Davidson were facing in their space and the impact that it has been having on their people, their teams, and the overall business performance. We then got to explore the inspiration in their corporate values and the social pillars, which really inspired the solution in the finished design. We then discussed the impact that the space has had and continues to have on their people, their recruitment, the cross-disciplinary collaboration, and to their bottom line. So this is the first part in a 2-part series. Part 2 will follow in next week's episode as Jacqui and I are joined by Kylie Barlow, Patrina Stewart and Dan Matteo for a panel conversation on all things work, people and place. So having kicked off in Brisbane and finishing in Sydney, Melbourne was the second stop in our festivities celebrating the launch of my book. All of these conversations, as I said, are going to be shared right here on the podcast. So if you have missed the first 2 episodes from Brisbane, head back, tune into those. And all up, there will be 6 episodes where I share all of these conversations from these magical evenings with you. It was a really beautiful experience, actually. I absolutely loved it. And I will share more of that in a future episode. But for now, tune in and learn how we can all continue to elevate our experience of work.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for coming along tonight. Tonight's about celebrating the launch of my book, The Next Workplace, Designing Dynamic Environments that Inspire Human Potential. It's lovely to see some very familiar faces here. Some I have only ever met on Zoom, and now I get to see whole bodies, which is lovely. And some new ones. So thank you. Whether you've come along to support me or you're really interested in the conversation tonight or both, I'm really grateful for you all to be here. So thank you. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet here tonight. Now, please forgive me if I do get this wrong. The Wurundjeri Wo Wurrung and the Bunurong Bun Wurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin. Now, my book tells a story about strengthening cultures and really instilling a sense of belonging through our connection to the places in which we work. This is a knowing that our First Nations people have always understood. Their relationship to the culture and to their sense of belonging is in their connection to place and to country. And so I pay my respects to elders past and present. Now, in imagining tonight and what it would be like, the last thing I wanted to do was to really get up here and talk about my book and what I'd done and, how I'd wrote it. I wanted this to be an opportunity to really shine a light on some of the amazing work that is being done across organisations, connecting workplace design, people, culture, and the future of what work and our workplaces really can be. I really want to elevate the experience of work within our organisations. So our panelists this evening are navigating that next frontier of work and the workplace, and I'm really excited for them to share with you their amazing work and what they're doing. So tonight you're going to hear from Jacqui Whiteman, who is the COO at Davidson, and we're going to engage in a conversation around reflecting on both their Brisbane and their Melbourne workplace journeys and the impact it has had on their business. You're going to be hearing from Kylie Ballou, MD of Australia and New Zealand at ADP, Katrina Stewart, People and Inclusion Lead at KPMG, and Daniel Matau, Global Director of People and Organisational Development. And we're going to engage in a broader conversation on work, plus you're going to get a chance to ask them your questions as well, so to be sure to take note of any that pop up along the way. So tonight is really about a celebration of what work can be. Now, 4 years ago, I was told that I should write a book. And for me, I'm not really good at taking instructions or being told what to do, so I had to kind of figure out why I would want to write a book. And it was an interesting journey for me, and I had to take some time to figure that out. And it's been a 4-year journey to actually build this book and to create it. And I've probably written about 60% of it in the last 9 months. The pandemic has completely changed that perspective that many have of what their workplace is about. And I think it's for the better. And this book really couldn't be more timely. Even with a newborn baby, I decided that this book had to be written. It was to ride the wave of change that the pandemic had actually brought, and I needed to finish it and put it out into the world. So that's what we're here tonight to discuss and to celebrate. This book is really a playbook for anyone who's looking to elevate the experience of work. It's a manual that's going to connect the concepts of modern day management theory to our physical structures of our physical environments. And it really explains the complexities of the process of bringing a workplace to life, highlighting the importance of bringing the right people to the table. Historically, our workplaces have been a place to accommodate our people, where we go Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Our workplaces have been a cost of doing business, built to house the same number of people that we employ, and typically under the directive from finance handed down to the property and facilities team. IT have been informed about how many desktops need to be kitted out with IT, and then HR have been instructed to revise the contracts to let everyone know where their new place of work is. This book and the conversations that we're going to share tonight will start to connect these really previously disparate functions of our organisations and show how when we bring people and culture, work with property and facilities, and they all engage together and they're charged with delivering the project as a collective team, the outcome is that we're going to ensure the creation of the most dynamic and strategically aligned workplaces for our organisations. So to kick off this conversation, I would really like to invite Jacqui Whiteman to come and join me up here. Now, Jacqui is the Chief Operating Officer at Davidson, a workplace performance business supporting organisations to do exactly that. Enhance workplace performance through their 3 key business streams: business advisory, search and recruitment, and technology consulting. With over 15 years' experience leading successful recruitment teams, Jacqui is accountable for execution and delivery of strategic business plans, business continuity, financial management, and the overall operational performance of the national business. Jacqui is a highly motivated leader and well known within the business community for improving internal process, building new business streams to reflect market demands, and developing highly motivated and successful teams. Jacqui has been with Davidson for the past 5 years, and I have had the pleasure of working closely with her on the Melbourne workplace and from afar on the Brisbane workplace projects for Davidson, both of which we are going to dive into tonight. So please welcome Jacqui.
Thanks, Mel. You can come sit, Jacqui. Yep. Very formal.
Yeah. So to lay the foundations for this conversation, myself and the team at Community, we started working with Davidson back in 2019. So it's pre-pandemic when we started this. And working with the CEO and the local Brisbane team, we really guided the Davidson crew through our workplace dynamics blueprint to help them develop the strategy for what their workplace would be looking forward to, what that design was going to look like. And then we guided that whole process through the documentation and delivery as well. The latter phases of the project were actually completed during the first few weeks of lockdown. So we had a very interesting path to navigate. We were still in design development at the time that lockdown happened. So we were navigating this whole idea of meeting over Zoom and how do we present finishes and all of the things that go with creating a workplace and really trying to find new technology. We were working with, our team was dispersed. So we were in Brisbane at the time, but we had team here in Melbourne. And so we were finding new ways to collaborate and all of those fun things that we got to do as a design team. And the project was actually then constructed through COVID, achieving completion in August 2020. So it was a really fun time for us to be able to put all of this together. So, Jacqui, I want you to help us set the scene. If you cast your mind back to when this first embarked on this whole journey to create your new workplace, what were some of the challenges that you experienced that you knew you needed help with? Just help us understand what it looked like and felt like for Davidson at the time.
Yeah, thanks, Val. So Davidson, for those that don't know us, has traditionally always been a recruitment business and really ventured out into consulting in the technology space and then advisory being business advisory. So born and bred out of Brisbane, but a national business now. And for us, we had different business lines. So we had probably a house of brand of 15 different brands, and our office represented those 15 brands. So there were segments all around our office, which Mel probably had the pleasure of visiting when we were going through this, where we'd have one team on one side of the office and another team on another. And there'd be hallways and lifts and reception and kitchen areas that were in between everybody. So there was times in our office in Brisbane where people would not even know each other face to face or would not come in to collaborate. They wouldn't see each other, let alone talk about, like for like clients, where we were trying to build our brand. So part of it was how do we continue to grow, but how do we collaborate as a group? And the first thing was that our office was not fit for purpose. It didn't allow us to do that. It was also very outdated. It was an original government building that was built for purpose for what they did and the many divisions that they had as part of their program work. So for us, it was about how do we look at that? Being a established recruitment business, particularly in Brisbane, it was all about fun. It was all about celebrating wins, but we were very clinical. So our offices didn't probably equal the brand or the branding that we wanted to go to market with.
Yeah, and you're right there. It was split into these really 4 disparate pockets. And so there were silos that had actually formed because of the physical barriers within the workplace. But also, this was the first time that you guys had actually looked to build anything purpose-built for yourself. So 30 years, and you had been kind of accommodating in fitted out space that you'd taken on from previous people as well. So a big part of the driver for this was to start to look at what the workplace of the future was going to look like for the business. And even pre-COVID, they were quite forward thinking in the fact that, we might want to do this hybrid agile thing one day. So let's put that on the table and we'll think about how that goes as we go along. And so it was really interesting to be working with such an aligned client, particularly from the workplace performance piece. We have very similar ethos around how we operated, but most really around that ideal of what they wanted work to be for their people and how they wanted them to experience that when they showed up each and every day. And so going through our workplace dynamics process, we were really able to start to look at that in much more detail and understand, who they were and what type of space would really help their people to shine. So we started looking at what that existing space looks like. And when we came on board, you guys had already signed a lease. So you'd already committed to another building. You'd already committed to a footprint. This is kind of it. Here's your box. Let's go. But by going through the briefing process and really starting to understand who they were as a business, we learned so much more about the values of the business and the social pillars that existed underneath it too. And so design for me is really about understanding what the values of an organisation are and then how those values elicit behaviours and what those behaviours then can be, how we can influence them through the design of space. And what we got out of this relationship was such a deeper understanding because of your social pillars as well that really came to the forefront. And, that then led us into looking at spatial typologies for the space as well. So previously in the old offices, you'd had offices, meeting rooms, workstations, and that was it. And there was this funny kitchen in the middle that kind of linked them all together. So we wanted to start to look at, well, what are the types of activities that the team are doing? How do they need to work? How do they need to be connected? And we started to build out a suite of alternative ways that people could work, different types of spaces that would suit the different needs that they had. And we then had to look at, well, what's the best use of this space? Because we only had a finite amount of space. The footprint was fixed. And so we looked at some scenario models then and we looked at, well, what does that mean if we have to fit this many workstations, but we still want to have these alternative spaces because people need to be able to work differently? And how do we then bring those values to life of the organisation? So we really needed to look quite deeply at that and how they came to life. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But that's kind of just laying the foundation of understanding the way that these stories came through from the organisation. They really were rooted in who they were and understanding that and wanting to bring that to life. And Jacqui, what I'd really like to understand from you is how did this process really challenge the idea of what was possible for you guys as an organisation. And, even then in the context of informing the Melbourne workplace as well, because once we'd finished Brisbane, we went on to support Jacqui in Melbourne. And when we did that, we were actually coming out of COVID and you were trying to entice people back into the workplace in terms of timing. So the context was quite different. The drivers were quite different. What was challenging for that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing was that we had a preconceived idea on what the workplace needed to be. Most of it was about, so our search business would run panels and we would have external clients from a confidentiality point of view coming in all the time. And they'd be walking through reception or they would be walking into rooms and they could be seen. So part of it was about, well, how do we still have fun as a business? How do we collaborate together? How do we make sure that we're identifying our social pillars? And one of those being First Nations. And how do we make sure that we're moving into what our founding owners wanted us to do and respect that in our environment, but also to have the privacy for our executive clients that were coming through that didn't want to know that, the whole world, that they were going through a process. So it was all about how do we get open space? Can you achieve open space? I mean, I'm thinking 2019 doesn't seem like a long time ago, but the concept of having an open environment like we have now was probably unheard of in 2017, 18 to be able to build something that we now have, which is probably becoming a test case for most businesses, predominantly in Melbourne as we start to come back into what does work look like. So we threw around lots of ideas of, well, how do we start to look at the customer experience? We're always dealing with clients. They're coming to us for our ideas. How do we help them with their business, their strategy, their operations? But our office and who we were didn't reflect our personality. So we had to look at, well, what do our staff want to see? And I think the survey piece that we pulled together was really eye-opening around what we saw versus what they saw and how did we get them to, raise that productivity, but also want to come to work. At that time, we didn't have an issue with people wanting to come into the office. Now, in hindsight, they do. And I think we've also achieved that now in both those offices because we did do that market survey around what they wanted as well. We had lots of, no, you can't do that. And I know that sounds very vanilla. No, we can't have an open roof, exposed roof. No, we can't have clients on one side and then a kitchen next to us. You can't do that. How does that work? And I know that Mel spent a lot of time talking to the team in Brisbane, fighting off those arguments, saying, no, that's not how things are done. But we kept pushing. And we had a head of CX at the time, and he really saw the vision of what that business needed and pushed through and got the skeptics to say, let's look at this. And I think, when I look at the end product in Brisbane, it's exactly what we wanted, and if not more. Also, given the environment we're in today, it's definitely fit for purpose.
I think it helped you guys prepare and transition through that. And it's interesting when you said fun, it reminded me, part of the initial concept was that, being initially a recruitment agency, there is a lot of fun that happens at the back. So we ended up with an initial concept that we kind of thought was a little bit funny, but it was like Harvey Specter from Suits, very professional at the front, but then it was Joe Dirt at the back. So there was lots of party happening. And so we really wanted to have that distinguishing between what was happening at the front of house that was client facing, but then still have that sense of fun and collegiate nature that was happening in the back of house. So,
which is the cafe.
Yeah.
So when we think the cafe, we had to grow up to our business. And so we're a diverse business now where, we've got different demographics, we've got different cultures. So you have to have a cafe that allows someone to be over here to have a glass of wine, but then have the coffee machine for someone to sit down and be in a similar environment. So that was unheard of in our business, to be able to stay in your office and socialise and know that your desk is there and then over here you can be relaxed. So it was one of the positives, I think, through all of the process we went through with yourself.
And it was a big challenge because the cafe is quite central to the entire workplace. So there was this whole idea of it's going to be too noisy, there's too many smells, all of the usual kind of things that come out of it. But it's worked really well because of the way that it actually becomes this hub for the rest of the business.
What do our workplaces look like when we no longer need to go to work? As organisations navigate a new frontier, struggling to work out what's next in today's hybrid and distributed world, how can we leverage one of our greatest assets, our workplace? My book, The Next Workplace, Designing Dynamic Environments that Inspire Human Potential, will show you how to leverage your workplace to attract and retain talent, increase employee engagement, and elevate employee experience, plus deliver bottom-line returns on your investment. The Next Workplace is the ultimate playbook. It will inspire your thinking, show you how to unlock the data in your business, provide you with the resources to build your business case with confidence, and reveal the proven frameworks and practical tools to align, enable, and inspire the human potential within your organisation. So, to grab your copy and begin to reimagine your next workplace, head over to my website, melissamarsden.com.au/book.
I mentioned earlier that we started to look really deeply at the organisational values and those social pillars. And these really laid that foundation for the development of the whole entire project. So they really became a core inspiration for the project direction and how we wanted to bring this whole project to life. And the real essence of these values, there's quite a few, so I won't take you through all of them. They're in the book if you want to have a look at that in more detail. But they were really around connectivity and belonging and that sense of inclusivity. And that's really at the heart of what Davidson are about as a business. And so we really wanted to leverage that and bring that to life. So everything came through from the shapes and the textures. So we really embraced that circular form. So the D for Davidson is obviously very curved, but so is the floor plate itself. It's actually in a sort of half circle type space. It's a really interesting building. So we wanted to kind of embrace as much of that as we possibly could and the different textures that would come in. And it was about this really handcrafted concept, sort of inspiring a lot of that materiality. And the colours then we're leveraging off the Davidson brand, but also bringing that warmth and that nature, but also that very professional polish at that front of house, and then having that little bit more fun in the back of house. It was really around planning and flexibility too. So the main reception space comes off this circular lift, and then there is the ability to open up the cafe and connect that into the reception for functions and sort of increase that volume of area. We've held some functions there as well, thanks to the Davidson team, and it's been a great space to really offer some connectivity, which then bleeds out into the workplace itself. And so the whole idea was around really centrally positioning that cafe, because the kitchen really is the heart of the business, and it was a place that was then easily accessible from all points on the floor and an open space that enabled conversations. But the way that we've created it was the ability to conversations to flex in and out. So off the cafe is a series of collaboration spaces. So whilst you're in there having a coffee or having lunch or having an informal chat, you have the ability then to sort of break off into those collaboration spaces and continue that in a more functional, work-related way to expand that conversation as it then transitions out into the workspace. So the furniture around the actual space itself created a buffer and a transition zone so that if you're in your workstation trying to do your work, you don't feel like you're actually sitting in the kitchen. And that ability to open it up was a really big function of that. And then, you talked about the need for having that separation between your clients coming in and that executive search and having that privacy level. So they were kind of wrapped around the two sides of the building. So off the reception, you have the ability to go left or right, and they kind of wrapped around the outside, which was fortunate because we had this beautiful natural light that worked around all the sides. So we were able to optimize that as much as possible. And then zoning became a really big part of that whole conversation. And if you're not familiar with the eudaimonia machine, it's about this transition through cognitive levels of concentration. And so you come into the space where you're inspired and you can socialize and you can converse and you can chat. And then progressively you work through different layers of cognitive function. And we use that model in the workplace planning to enable different behaviours to happen and for people to progressively get into deep work and the ability to do that deep concentrative thinking then as well. And one of those spaces, and you mentioned the First Nations, you guys have a very strong affinity with the Yallery mob. And so we wanted to pay respect to that as well. So we've introduced a yarning circle, and we've actually used one of Stylecraft's beautiful pieces of furniture there and in the Bloom Lounge. And that's the space in which people are having in these informal conversations. And it really has become that, that fire pit kind of conversation where anyone can come in, they can sit and have that conversation, they can brainstorm something, and it's directly related off the work area as well. So it's created this little ecosystem of spaces that has enabled all these different behaviours to come to life. And the big factor that was a part of this was about visual connectivity across the floor, because coming from a space where it was so segregated and it was so siloed, visual connectivity was a big part of that. And so we've managed to achieve that even with like a sweeping floor plate. So it's been an interesting project to have been involved in, and it's really created this other piece that has been really important has been about the generational transfer of knowledge. And, with executive search, you've got some very experienced team members there. And then, of course, with the younger generations coming in, and this is a conversation I'm hearing a lot happening in the workplace at the moment, is How do we get that informal knowledge sharing? How do we get that training to go from, one experience level to the next? And the great thing I think about the way this workplace has come together is that you've got these embedded collaboration spaces that enable people to overhear conversations, to be able to pick up conversations and take them to those spaces and then to continue them on. So I'm extremely proud of the project and how it's all come together. But if it hadn't been for you guys and the Brisbane team, it's been a great project to be involved in, and it's lovely to have also been recognised. It's been recognised in the DIA Awards and InDesigners Awards as well. But Jacqui, I'd love to know, you've been in there for 3 years now. How has it really enhanced the employee experience of work? And as a result, how's it impacted on the business overall?
Yeah, so I think going back to the original conversation around being very segregated in our business lines and not collaborating and people not really knowing each other. So we're talking probably around 65 employees that are at different ends of a room, just to give you some context on numbers. So not a large, but a medium-sized cohort of people that don't know each other personally. So now when you walk into the Brisbane office, you are, as Mel said, walking into this circle and you know either someone to the right is where everybody's working or they're having lunch, they're having a cafe. So there's no real way to escape. So you do have to talk to each other or collaborate or acknowledge. You know how people are feeling when they're walking in because you're seeing it and you're feeling it. So I think for us, the first thing was we have these values, which we've had for 30 years since we've been established. Our owners were very entrepreneurial back then and visionary in regards to that, and they've never changed. I think now we can actually show proof that our values are in what we do day in and day out within our office environment. And I think it's brought collaboration, greater sales, greater development for our staff. There is an increased revenue that Mel refers to as well, which I'll let Mel talk to that. And that's just by sheer learning, junior people to senior, talking about the different levels of experience across the group and how do they learn and develop. If I look back on how I learned from people being around me or taking me on the journey, saying, okay, come on, let's go, come with me. And I think, that was something that we took for granted in our Brisbane office. And now it's part of every day for them. Everybody's on the floor. That goes right down to CEO, goes down to owners. We all are in open floors. We do have offices that we can lean into as we see fit, but we use that as an open environment, as trying to keep everything neutral so that people feel open to ask those conversations where previously we always said the door's open, but the door was never open. I don't know what happens if anyone in the room that's in that type of role that you do have an office. I don't know what happens, but your door's always closed. Yeah. Whether you want it to be or not, it just happens to someone walks in and they close it. So that's also been removed as well. Our engagement amongst our employees through our engagement survey has increased by about 30%. So last year it was 83%. The year before, very low, around that 60, 62. We've just got the first round of our surveys for this year, and it's a little bit lower down on the 79. But I think that we're coming off the back of Melbourne, because Melbourne is still in this horrible office that we should have moved 18 months ago, but due to COVID, we're delayed. So not knowing the data offhand, because I've been off site this week, I would say that's the engagement piece. Our, retention is the highest it's ever been. So when I look at that, what are you doing? What are we doing differently? I think our recruitment costs are down. People are staying longer. They're more engaged. They're doing more. So, figures wise, yes, it's been great. But I think for us moving forward, if I look at that office and that collaboration has been key to our success, but also to, I guess, the growth of the business.
And how are you finding the net? Like, are people coming back into the workplace? Because I know this is a hot topic for many businesses. How do we get people back in the office?
So Brisbane, no change. So anyone that does have Brisbane offices, I think you had sort of 4 to 6 weeks of lockdown in total. To Melbourne's, I think, 26 months in total on and off. So Brisbane, no problems. The issue we have in Brisbane is that we've run out of space. Mel did design 15 workspaces that we thought we'd put them in a storage room and they'd come out maybe in 5 years' time, and they've come out. So we put those in, I think, 12 months ago. We have a problem that people are owning their own desk. So soon enough, we're going to have to say, no, you can't anymore. We're doing hybrid. You can't just have a desk every day. I'll flip to Melbourne being the biggest employees. So we have just under 80 staff in the Melbourne office in Collins Street. We have 2 days, which I'm sure all of you are feeling the same. 2 days of full occupancy. Everyone's screaming for rooms. They need tables. They need desks. They're working from receptions. They're working from couches. And then the other days, you can have 10% or 5%. I think Monday and Fridays are our lowest. Mondays are getting a little bit better, but Fridays, literally, I could walk down the hallway and it's just me, myself and I. like many, I'm sure you are all in similar boats. So for us, we're using our Melbourne office design to hopefully bring people back, to come back to either a sense of collaboration, a sense of purpose, learning and development, not to just come in and do their jobs to be seen.
Yeah, and you've embraced that more shared desk approach in Melbourne as well. So
Well, we have to. So originally we were looking at, I think, 1,500 square metres for our Melbourne office. We then went down, Mel did the scoping for us and said, well, if you're looking at a 60-40, we sort of think 800. And then we've grown substantially. And our next 5 years growth is another 25%. So in the end, I made a judgment call. Mel was off having her baby and increased that by 120 square metres. So we're now saying just under 1,100 square metres.
that's reasonable.
In the end, just to get that space going. So that will give us close to 72 desks, but we'll have staff of 110 by the time, and it's a 3-4 year lease. So they will be on hot desks. There will be a space for everybody, which Mel worked with us. And what does that mean? So whether that be a collaboration desk, whether that be a phone booth, sitting here and where you're having a casual informal meeting, private space. A lot of our team are looking for that concentration room where they're working on proposals, particularly our business advisory and strategy teams. They want quiet. They don't want to hear what's going on over here. So how do we have lots of different spaces that allow people to just move around and not be stuck at the traditional desk? Come in and I sit there and that's my desk for the day.
And that diversity of space enables different workplace personalities, different styles of working, those different tasks and activities, because the different teams do need to work differently. So that enables that. One of the interesting comments that I got back from the team around Brisbane was that it was really surprising to see how the dress standard had elevated after they had created the new workplace. And all the ladies were wearing these beautiful dresses. They had their hair and makeup done and they had the high heels on, and the guys were wearing these beautifully cut suits. And it was interesting. I was talking to a psychologist about this and he goes, oh, there's actually a term for this. And I went, oh, really? And it's called the Pygmalion effect. And it's about when you create a space for people and you demonstrate to people that you care about them and that you're genuinely interested in their well-being, they will rise to meet that expectation. And so that's definitely what we've seen as a result of the space in Brisbane. And, when you talk about it as well.
At the moment in Melbourne, some of them look like they're rolled out of bed, to be honest. You're like, oh, thanks for coming in today. So we looked up, and everyone used to say in Brisbane that Melbourne was so corporate, like take your ties and your suits off. And now I'll be like, wow, shorts and thongs, guys, I'm not sure. So we've gone next level, seriously.
Oh, let's see what happens after this workplace is delivered. Yeah. So, no, that's awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing that insight, Jacqui. It's been lovely to hear and to be part of the journey, not just in Brisbane, but also in Melbourne, and to see the differences that happen in the different states and how that all comes together has been, really lovely as a strategist and a designer to have an involvement in that across the entire business. So thank you for that opportunity.
No, thank you for having me. And we wouldn't have the design without your thinking and the way that you really saw our vision. Brisbane wouldn't be what it is, and Melbourne will be off the back of all the work that you did with us to help create that. So thank you for everything that you did.
I appreciate that. Thank you.